What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Knuckle Sandwich. I'm your host, Brandon Anderson, and today we are sitting down with UFC, Bellator, PFL judge, Anthony Maness. We go over some of his most fantastic events and fights that he has been a part of all time. We talk about some of the new things coming to the UFC, and also we talk about the perspective and what they look for as judges in these pro fights. So, now that you're ready, make sure to turn on your listening ears, grab a sandwich, and kick your feet up because here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with the one and only former light heavyweight champ, kickboxer, promoter, ref, administrator, judge, you name it, he's done it. We are here with Anthony Maness. Anthony, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, glad to be here, brother. How you doing?
I'm good. I feel like I didn't really do the introduction justice with everything that you have done in the combat sports world, but hopefully we touch on quite a bit of it in this interview today. But yeah, I mean, I just saw you just last weekend at in Clarksville at the fights. How did you enjoy those? Those were pretty good, I felt like.
Yeah, I was impressed. Angel Promotions used to do shows years ago, and they've been on a hiatus, and it was good to see them come back. It was great to be in Clarksville. I got to see a lot of old friends, and the fights itself, I think they were really, really well.
Yeah.
And the Clarksville fan base has always been solid. That's a fight town, and I was impressed with the turnout.
Yeah,
It
for
it
sure.
looked sold out. I don't think they could have got another person in that venue.
Yeah, those all the chairs, the bleachers, everything were all filled. So it was cool to see, and it was cool to get to work the event. I was telling Mike Merriman, like, it's been 10, 12 years since I've been at a local MMA event. And so to be working it, doing interviews and all that, it was cool to feel like we're like I didn't miss a beat. I was back in the whole process again. So it was pretty neat. But yeah, the crowd was exciting. They were in it from the beginning to the end. It was really good. I'm excited for more to come, hopefully, in Clarksville. We'll see. Um, so let's talk about you as a fighter coming up, right? Like I had said in the intro, you were light heavyweight champion in kickboxing. I did some digging around on Facebook and Google and all that stuff. You were once ranked number 4 in the world in kickboxing, if I'm correct, right?
No, right, right. That was right before I won the world title.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about that. How did you kind of get into kickboxing and then really start to climb up the ranks and those kind of things?
Well, my first love has always been boxing.
Hmm.
Um, I I came up in the golden when I was a kid. I came up in the golden era. We had Muhammad Ali was at the end of his career, but there was George Foreman, Frazier, Ken Norton, all those great, great heavyweights that captured my imagination. Then we had, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto
Hmm.
Duran, all of them. And boxing was in its, to me, its heyday.
Oh yeah.
So I started boxing when I was 12 years old, sub novice. I finished my amateur boxing career 13 and 1. Um, so by then, I was like 18, 19. And during the off season, the Golden Glove came to Jackson, Tennessee once a
Hmm.
year. Someone that I worked with, Mr. David Rhodes, he was a black belt in Waterloo Karate. He suggested that I try karate just to keep my reflexes sharp. Um, and along about that time, the PKA premiered on ESPN,
Wow.
and I got introduced to the Bill Wallace, Bob Thunder Thurman, those kind of guys. And so I said, that's what I want to try. So by the time I was a brown belt, I started amateur kickboxing and finished at 45 and 5, 38 knockouts. And so I was like, wow, I like this. But I always want to point this out to any uh, potential fighters, and I guess this translates into other things too. A lot of people like to talk about the successes, the great record, and things like that. I lost three of the first four amateur fights I had.
Wow.
I was 1-3. Can you imagine how my friends and coworkers and family was saying, "Look, you suck.
Yeah, hang it up
You
already.
you suck. Hang it up." But I was just like, I, I I see what I'm doing wrong. I'm too tentative. I'm trying to be too technical. At the end of the day, it's a fight. So I had to let that brawler in me out, and I think I won like 38 straight. To any young fighter, a loss can be used as a great opportunity to grow. Um,
Hmm.
Now, obviously, combat sports is not for lose a fight. Don't think that that's the end. So that's a lesson that I learned early in my
Oh yeah.
career.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's what's the saying? It's not about how hard you can hit, but about how hard you can get hit and then get back up and keep fighting, right? So it's like taking those losses, learning from them, and then continuing to grow and improving after that. Um, so you had what'd you say, 50 fights, 45 and 5, right? How
Amateur, yes.
Who was your toughest opponent, amateur or pro, that you can think of, or if there's a couple of them?
Uh, there's no doubt who that was. It was a young guy. I fought him in Atlanta, Georgia. He was from the country, Columbia. Ricardo Nagara. I'll
Okay.
never forget that. A little stocky guy. Um, Technically, he was limited. The first round, I easily was beating him. And there's an old saying somewhere in the second round, I zigged when I should have zagged. Because in the locker room, everybody talked about how hard he hit. Uh, and it was just suddenly lights out.
Wow.
I looked up and there was a referee and he sounded like he was another room going 4, 5.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, he's knocked me down. So I struggled to my feet and I didn't realize it, but there was a puddle of blood on my chest because he had just like bloodied my nose.
Yeesh.
Um, and before that round was over, he knocked me down again. I got knocked down twice. I was one knockdown from getting stopped. By the way, I was never knocked out in amateur or pro,
There
but
you
he
go.
came really close.
Wow.
And that the third round, I was just fighting to survive. Basically, him chasing me around the ring and me, well, trying not to get hit again. And one reason I will never forget that fight, and this carried over into me as a judge to this day, I won that fight. I could not believe it when they read the scorecards and I won. I did not win that fight.
Hmm.
Trust me. Trust me. I lost that fight. And I had the opportunity to talk to one of the judges many years later. And we were talking, and I said, I've got to ask you. And he didn't even let me finish. He said, Anthony, you won that fight. You did. And I said, no, I didn't. Trust me, I didn't. And he started trying to explain how he gave me the first round and the third round because Nagara never hit me again. But come on,
Yeah.
I was fighting to survive. And basically, it was a foot race, him chasing me, trying to finish the job. But as a judge this day, I never forget how horrible I felt being awarded that decision
Mm.
when I knew I didn't win.
Yeah.
As a judge, you're not doing a fighter any favors by awarding them a fight that they know, the crowd knows, their coaches know, everybody knows you lost. You just
Yeah.
got a hometown decision. which Atlanta's not my hometown, but a
It's
Southern
closer
boy,
than Columbia. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
much closer than another country. So
So how did I know that, man, we could I feel like I could just sit here across my leg and just listen to you talk for about an hour or two about stories because it's just so interesting to hear about kind of the upbringing of you in combat sports and how that's transformed into who you are as the person and the judge and things like that today. Another thing that I want to talk about or touch on, and this probably segmented into this as well. Lexington, Tennessee is like your hometown. I remember a long time ago in the Team Rock Cage Assault days, Strike Team.
yes,
When did Strike Team kind of come around, and was that kind of ever something that you really envisioned yourself doing? Is like being part of this fight team, coaching things like that, taking these amateur fighters and bringing them pro, and is that something that you really thought about young days
absolutely
moving
not,
up? Yeah.
not at all. Um, I had pretty much gotten out of the fight game.
Okay.
Um, I was the head of security for a local bikini contest that was held at Fisherdale, the tea room every year. And after the contest, we always got on somebody's pontoon or houseboat, and the party started. Well, this young guy jumped up on this boat with a python around his neck, and he said, "Do you know me, Anthony Maness?" And I did recognize him because I went to church with him. And I said, "You're Jason Wood."
Oh
And he
gosh.
goes, and he goes, "Well, I want to be a fighter." And I remember thinking in my head, "Oh, do you now?" And I said, "I tell you what, um, come to Harvey's gym next Monday night, and we'll see." I
Yeah.
didn't even expect him to be there, but he showed up. He immediately agreed to fight in an amateur kickboxing event that next Thursday. He did remarkably well. And I was like, wow, he's the real deal.
Yeah.
So that started the process of actually teaching him how to fight. And that kind of bled into my involvement into mixed martial arts. I
Okay.
saw real quick, I could handle the striking, but I was sorely lacking in the submission, the ground game.
Hmm.
So we sought out a guy named Max Bishop
Yep.
and from Arkansas, and he loved Jason too, and he saw the potential. And so we just started blending what Jason was learning from Max into the striking that I was teaching, and Strike Team was born.
Wow.
And I said, the stars lined up with that team. I had Teddy Holder from Henderson,
Yeah.
who ended up fighting for a world title himself. He lost, but he still fought for it, and that's a hell of an accomplishment.
Oh yeah.
Um, Bobby Taylor, I think he's the fourth ranked bare knuckle boxer in the
Yeah.
world right now. I had obviously Jason, who actually fought for a world title himself.
Hmm.
It was just a bunch of super talented athletes that all came together to make Strike Team.
Yeah. Like I said, with the Team Rock days, I remember Strike Team not necessarily as a rival, right? But you guys had one dude that everybody in Camden wanted to beat, and that was Lane Lockhart.
Yes, yes,
Everybody wanted to beat Lane Lockhart, and nobody ever could as an amateur. We couldn't figure it out. And I remember, like,
yeah,
I think it was Adam Smothers and Chad Snyder, and everybody was like, I want him," and we couldn't do it. And it was I
yeah.
just remember that when I think of Strike Team, I think of those names like you said, like Bobby Taylor, Teddy Holder, Jason Wood, Lane Lockhart, all those guys. Cody Moore was another one.
Cody Moore,
Yeah, and that was a
Wesley Conway.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, there were several great,
yeah.
great fighters.
It's so interesting
Jimmy
to hear
Potts.
Jimmy Potts. Yes, I remember Jimmy too. That was you guys had such a well-rounded team for sure. it was you guys had a great group of dudes that tried to do everything, not just get in a cage and brawl, right? Like they actually understood and loved the game for itself rather than just trying to get in there and just fight somebody.
Yeah.
Which
Can you
is
imagine how fun it was for me to coach them
right.
animals? It's like, wow, it's so fun coaching these guys who are all true fighters. They listen, they they put in what you show them, teach them into action, and it was fun. It was a real fun part of my life.
What's some of the best memories of Strike Team, if you have any, just to pull out?
Well, now that the statute of limitations is probably passed, I can tell you know, they were a fun bunch, not only in the ring and cage, but outside. I'll
Hmm.
never forget, we were like in Arkansas, I think, for a fight. And it was over and we were headed back to the room, and the party was ensuing, the after party, and one of the guys jumped and slapped one of the fire extinguisher thing nozzles. He didn't break it off. Had he of, they would have had to evacuate the whole hotel. But he cut his hand so bad, and I'll never forget that. It's like,
Oh,
wow,
jeez.
as if the fight itself wasn't violent enough. They're still getting hurt after the fight.
Oh man, that's awesome. I love it. I can't wait to create more of those memories. And it's always good to kind of reminisce, look back on, and kind of see how all those things have like I said, brought us to where we are now. So let's kind of jump into the future a little bit, or the present day more so. You are a ISKA rep, is that right? Am I saying that
For the
correctly?
state of Tennessee, I'm
Hmm.
the ISK state director for Tennessee. And in Kentucky, I'm the state director for kickboxing only.
Okay. And so what is the job of the ISKA for you entail? Like what do you do with all that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm going to make this, very quick,
Okay.
um, because it's very, very detailed. In that role, I'm the guy that makes sure that hands are wrapped properly, the rules are followed and applied properly. The referee is doing a competent job. That all the safety protocols are in place. There's an ambulance. There's EMTs, a ringside physician. That everybody made weight. Uh, all the proper physicals and eye exams, and basically to make sure that all the rules are followed, laid out by the ISKA,
Okay.
which is the largest sanctioning body for amateur sports, combat sports in the world.
Yeah. So do you deal with mostly then like amateur events rather than like pro events, or do you do a mixture of both, or how does that work?
Well, under the umbrella of the ISK, it's all amateur. Now
Okay.
they do sanction pro fights, but I in the state of Tennessee and in most states, the state athletic commission sanctions and oversees the professional part.
Okay. Gotcha. With amateurs, do you ever feel like so in the sports world in general, right? Like we've always you have to be professional to get paid. That's always been the thing. But now we're seeing like with college athletes in basketball, football, and things like that, they can sign these NIL deals where they get paid by sponsors, yada yada yada. Do you think that we will ever get there with amateur fighters to where they're getting paid in these NIL deals and things of that nature? Because I feel like
No,
recently I've kind of noticed back 10, 12 years ago, you would see guys fight 10, 15, 20 amateur fights before going pro. But it seems like now there's fighters that are only having two or three amateur fights and then turning pro just so they can start getting paid for it.
exactly. That's a great question, and I've thought about it myself. The the big difference, I think, between combat sports and like a football, basketball, combat sports has such a short. Those athletes have such a short window.
Hmm.
And because of the reason that you just said, two or three amateur fight, it's very hard to judge the potential or future of an amateur fighter when they've only fought two or three fights.
Right.
Um, so it's doubtful that that would ever happen.
Okay.
You know, when I think back to when I was referring to boxing, if you remember Oscar De La Hoya,
Hmm.
uh, locally, Jackie Beard, those guys, Sugar Ray Leonard, perfect example. Those guys, their potential was obvious.
Okay.
We all knew that they were going to be successful pros, and they were. If that situation existed today, which I cannot see that happening in MMA or kickboxing now, it's unheard of for a kickboxer to have 50 fights now. Nobody
Right.
does that. Uh, that's why I say I doubt it. It's
Gotcha.
just not enough opportunity to judge the the financial impact that this athlete might have.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. Um, so I'm trying to connect the dots, Anthony, because I'm trying to create a leadway into judging, right? So we started out in the boxing, kickboxing, moved into coaching, then ISKA, and then how did we become kind of the professional judge that we are now? What was that bridge of the gap there that got us into the profession we're in?
Well, um, luck,
Okay.
preparation. I think it was Lee Trevino one time said he had like chipped one in from like 30, 40 yards out. And one of his guys that was playing the round of golf with him said, "Wow, you are so lucky." And he said, "Yeah, I am. And the more I practice, the luckier I get."
Hmm.
And that's a great quote because you you have to be competent. And that only comes from doing it so much. Uh, I had judged, I got asked this question last Saturday night. How many fights have I judged? It's honestly probably in the thousands.
Yeah.
See, I judged for Tough Man
Okay.
for 10, 15 years. I was going all over the United States judging Tough Man events,
Wow.
amateur boxing, amateur kickboxing, amateur MMA. So here's the luck part. I happen to know Jeff Mullen,
Okay.
who had been such a huge part of my career. He was actually at the Bill Wallace fight, cornering another fighter. So he saw me from fighter to judge, and he was very impressed with me as a judge. So when he became the Tennessee athletic director, he started using me for big fights that came to Tennessee, such as UFC, Bellator. Well, when I retired from my real job at Columbus McKinnon, I reached out, uh, and I don't know if you know this. My wife passed away of cancer
Right.
along at the same time. So I found myself really open to travel, to do that kind of thing. So it's like, be careful what you wish for, because I reached out to the ISKA, the UFC, Bellator, the boxing world, Floyd Mayweather. I said, I am available if you guys need me. Well, they took me at my word.
Oh yeah.
Um, so next thing I know, I'm spending half my life on a plane, um, going to judge. But then Jeff Mullen had become the Nevada athletic director.
Okay.
And that's just like, you have Nevada and California. Andy Foster, who tells the story all the time about being a kid, and he saw me fight in Atlanta. And so I had two great, that's call it luck, opportunity, whatever, for those two guys to start using me. And I'm just being brutally honest. It was a lot of luck involved.
Yeah, because I remember, I think it was after UFC Nashville in August, I messaged you and I was like, "All right, Anthony, how do I get to where you are? How do I be you in the future?" And you're just like, "Man, it's a tight-knit community. You got to start at the bottom and know some people, and that's pretty much how you get
Mhm.
there." And
Yeah,
so it's cool to hear you say, like, you did the tough man competition for 10, 15 years, and then you started doing other stuff, and
yeah.
then by
It's a
knowing
long
people
road,
and connections. Yeah, absolutely.
but
So
you have to be ready when the opportunity comes.
for sure. Absolutely. So being a judge, this I think, in my opinion, other than obviously the fighters, because you're getting beat up, judges and refs definitely have the hardest jobs when it comes to fight night, right? Like you are the
Right.
deciding factors in what the heck is going on if the fighters can't do it themselves. And so we've kind of touched on this question a little bit with the process of becoming a judge, but what does it take to be a judge on the highest level where you're at right now?
Well, the first thing you have to clearly understand the criteria that you're judging these fighters by. And that's a rift between the fight community, the judges, and the general fan base.
Hmm.
Because trust me, everybody is an expert on MMA.
Every fan
I don't
thinks they
care.
could jo- every fan thinks they could do it.
Yeah, I don't care if it's Joe Blow who's sitting in a local bar, drinking beer, occasionally glancing up at the screen. He will be the first one to call you an idiot because you judged a round or a fight a certain way.
Hmm.
Because trust me, he's an expert. They don't understand how detailed the criteria. We have constant meetings like this, Zoom meetings on training, new developments, things that we need to look for. And the most controversial is the 10-8 round.
Oh, I love it. Let's get into it
Um,
because that's one of my questions too is for you as a judge, what are you looking for in a 10-8 round?
well, you have the three basics: damage, dominance, and duration,
Okay.
with by far the most important being damage because it's
Okay.
a fight. Um, as a judge, if you have dominance and duration, that's rare that that's enough for me to give you a 10-8.
Okay.
Let's say a guy, he gets an early takedown and he takes the guy's back, but he doesn't even come close to sinking in a rear naked or anything. But he did have dominance. He had a dominant position and he had duration of the round. But at the end of the round, the guy on the bottom jumps up. He's unmarked. He's fresh. And in essence, the guy who had his back with his legs grasping, trying to actually may have damaged himself more than the guy that he had the dominant position on. I actually
Right.
saw that 2 weeks ago in Vegas. A guy kept his opponent's back pretty much the whole round, and he could barely walk at the end of the round because he gassed his legs and he got TKO'd early the next round.
Wow.
But now a 10-8 round is when there's clear damage. Fighter A is scoring hard blows. He has that dominant position, be it striking, be it ground, for the duration of the round. That's a 10-8 round.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But,
Go
you,
ahead.
you know, you have to be a 10-8 round, as we saw in the UFC a month or so ago. It has huge impact. Let's say you and I are in an MMA fight. You
Hmm.
clearly win round one.
Hmm.
You clearly win round two. But uh, I get a flash knockdown. You go down. But for the last 3 minutes, let's say, you're scrambling and I'm in a dominant trying to finish it. You give me that 10-8 round, now it's a draw.
Hmm.
And yet you won most of that fight. You won two, almost one half of
Right.
another round of that. Yeah, now we're looking at a draw, and I
Right.
hate draws.
Yeah, there
The
was.
fans hate draws.
I think we're probably thinking of the same fight in the Noche UFC main event, the Shevchenko Grasso, and there was a controversial 10-8. I don't remember the judge, and I'm not name dropping anybody,
Oh, I
but
do. I do, and I cannot name his name. Very good friend of mine.
yeah, and that's kind of one of my questions too. Is like, do all judges normally kind of see the fight the same? I mean, I know everybody has their own scorecard, but would you have given a 10-8 round in that fight if say you were sitting at that table?
In all due respect, I can't answer that question.
Fair enough,
Uh,
understood.
and I'll tell you why. I did not see that fight
Okay,
live. I
and that
saw
makes a
it
huge
replay.
difference, right?
It makes a huge difference. And I know that judge very well,
Hmm.
one of the highest regarded judges in the world.
Okay.
So I don't know what he saw, but I'm positive he had a better angle than I did.
I'm sure, and it kind of
So
goes back how you said, like, "Hey, Joe Blow at the bar." Everybody's an expert at being a judge, you know. So it's like it's all he said, she said, watching on the camera. But he probably saw something completely different sitting right there. Maybe they were right in front of him, and he saw something that we all didn't.
I'll give an example.
Yeah.
There was a round in one of the prelims several weeks ago at a fight night, UFC fight night. I was the only judge that gave it this round to the fighter that the other two judge said lost this round.
Okay.
I was right under a takedown, and a guy took his back. That rear naked choke was deep.
Mm.
How that guy, well, I know how he survived. The round ended.
Yeah.
But the other two judges couldn't see that.
Right.
And when I told them, we always have a meeting about why we scored that, the other two judges said, I had no idea it was that deep. I couldn't see from that angle. I said, no, their backs were to you,
Yeah.
but it was right above me. It was deep. The guy, I literally could hear him gurgling for
Ooh.
breath. And had the round not have ended when it did,
The fight would
within
have
another
ended more than
5 seconds,
Yeah.
he would have had to tap
Wow.
or go to sleep.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I mean, it's so cool to hear that kind of stuff, like I said, because we don't have that kind of vantage point watching on the TV or even in the stands. I mean, you to get the best view of the fight, you've got to be right there. And I one day I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna watch it like that because I want to. That's amazing. All right,
Well,
hang on.
you have to have quite a budget for your dry cleaning
Yeah.
because you get a lot of blood on your shirt and jacket and things like that.
All right, so we've talked about 10-8 rounds and how damage, duration, and dominance really play a role in that. And we talked about too how the vantage point from beside the cage is completely different from watching on TV or even live just from the stands. I heard recently, and I think this is probably just like a hypothetical theory or something like that, but I want to get your take on it too. I think it was on the Anik and Florin podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Apparently, they were talking about that there could be one day where we get to where there are 5 judges judging a fight rather than just 3. What's your take on
Yeah.
having more judges for a fight?
Well, obviously, it gives more opportunity for different angles to be observed. Uh, Initially, I would think, yes, you would probably get a better decision.
Mm-hmm.
But you asked a question earlier. I didn't get a chance. We kind of got off subject. Sal D'Amato did an analogy himself and did some analyzation of uh, stats that had came out. Over 90% of the time, all 3 judges agree on a round.
Wow.
I know it doesn't sound like that, but when he did, I mean, he's going from prelims that you probably never see.
Right.
It We agree, and then I think, well, yeah, I can believe that because we go into those debriefing meetings, and usually all 3 of us agree, and You know, here comes one of my stories. Okay.
All right.
This was like 3 months ago, I guess. I was assigned the very first fight of the event, which is a prelim that rarely gets televised.
Okay.
I can't even recall the two fighters. It was a very easy fight to judge. One fighter clearly dominated 2 rounds. The other guy got the best shot 1 round. All 3 judges saw it 2 rounds to 1 for the winning fighter, unanimous decision. So I sit down in my chair and my phone starts buzzing. I thought at this rate, well, I started getting worried. Maybe, my family, something's going on at home.
Yeah.
I look down. I have 3 messages on Facebook request, which means it's messages from people that I'm not friends with, and Instagram, 3 messages on Instagram. This is 6 messages in 30 seconds. I'm going to give you examples. Just how stupid are you? Are you blind?
Wow.
Are you a member of the mafia? Who paid you off? How much did it cost for you to see that fight? And I'm like, oh my God.
Holy moly.
It wasn't even a controversial fight. It was a easy fight to judge. But that just goes back to what I was saying. Everybody in this world is an expert.
For sure.
And they don't understand, just because you come from the same hometown, or you know this guy because you went to high school with him, or you like the color of his trunks, you have to put all of that aside. And the athletic commissions go as far as they can to make sure those kind of things are not at play. I will never be able to judge Nathan Maness.
Okay.
Nathan is not even related to me, but we have the same last name.
I said, because he fights this weekend, I do believe, I think it's this weekend or next weekend, I believe. But yeah.
I think it's the next weekend.
Okay.
It's highly unlikely that I would ever be able to judge Bryce Mitchell, Nate Landwehr, because they just know that I have a long relationship with them. I mean, I saw these kids fighting when they first started as amateur.
Yeah.
And even though I'm relatively positive I could judge them impartially, they just don't even want to put me in that position. And I respect that. I don't want to be put in that position. It to the casual fan, it's hard to put those things out of your mind. You may be impressed with this fighter from 3 fights ago. You might have become a fan, and they let that bleed into. In essence, when I'm judging a 3-round fight, we are taught it's 3 fights. Every round stands on its own. You can't even if they did something super impressive, like, I'm an old kickboxer. Let's say in the first round, this guy lands a beautiful roundhouse that I cannot let thoughts like this. Oh man, he's a kickboxer. That was a great kick. He is super talented. No, he landed a kick. That's all he did. He landed a kick. And you have to focus. It's pinpoint focus on everything stands on its own.
Yeah.
At the end of that round, if I think fighter A won, when I turn that card in, when the bell rings, it's a whole new fight.
So you guys turn in cards after each round then, right?
After each round.
Okay, gotcha. And so what's kind of the criteria when judging around? We've talked about 10-8s, but even like just judging in general, like how do you what's top of the list and second and then third that you look for? Like if significant strikes were even, then like what is it? And then you know what I mean?
First is always damage.
Okay.
Um, who is hurting the other opponent? Be it a sustained body attack, legs, they say they're attacking with leg kicks, or the most obvious to the face and head through hard shots, be it hand or foot, elbows, knees. You first thing you establish who did the most damage,
Mm.
because you're going to hear me say this a lot. At the end of the day, it's a fight. It's a fight.
Yeah.
I paid little to no attention to punch stats.
Okay.
And if you was privileged to some of the things that I am, you would understand how, I'm not going to say they're meaningless. You've got a guy or lady sitting there tapping a keyboard. They they don't really know if that punch landed or not. They're usually rows and rows back. Whereas I'm sitting there, I hear the impact.
Mm-hmm.
I see the guy's eyes. Uh, I see the shock wave go through their neck and shoulder. I know that was a real punch.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think I'm going to give five flicking jabs that don't even wipe the sweat off the guy's face, and by the way, three of them didn't even land. It
Yeah.
looked like it did, but it didn't. So now that's, well, he landed five punches to this guy's one. Mm-hmm. And that one did more damage than
Yeah.
50 of those little, peppering, measuring jabs.
Yeah.
So damage is king.
Okay.
Damage is always king. And
Gotcha.
then
And
you
so,
look for the other two, dominance.
mhm.
Let's say there's little to no damage on either side. Who was the pusher of the fight? Who was the aggressor? Who made the fight happen? Who had the other opponent in a state of retreat or survival? And how long was that? Was that
Mhm.
a sustained, or was it just he had his moments? And you talk about a hard fight to judge, is one where there's no damage. No one was really the aggressor. No
Mhm.
one had ever got a real dominant position. So there was no duration. You're sitting there going, there's 10 seconds left in the fight, in the round, and you're going, please
Yeah.
somebody land a hard shot. Please somebody land a takedown.
Yeah.
Anything to give us something to judge.
Yeah.
I hate those fights.
Because a lot of times, especially in the championship fights or just bigger names, whenever there's always that feeling out process, and sometimes they go a little longer than you would hope that they would, like you said, and it'd be the whole first round. I know Israel Adesanya has been known for a couple of those where it's like the first round. I know his and Yoel Romero's fight. It was like probably the hardest fight ever to judge because it's like there wasn't much done at all the whole time.
Right. I hate those.
Yeah. So what is the hardest fight? Let's start with this year. You've judged a lot. I've got it pulled up. I've been looking throughout all the fights you've judged, and what I found was, let's see, I'm gonna pull it up real quick. 2010 is what I have. Strike Force, April 17th. Muhammad Lawal versus Gerard Mousasi is the first one that's on here, and then the most recent one is just what 9/23, so just a couple weekends ago. Johns and Argueta. What this year? Let's talk about this year first. What's been the hardest fight for you to judge this year?
I don't want to be evasive with it because that's a great question,
Hmm.
but it's one I honestly could not answer. I've
Okay.
had so many fights this year. It's been terrible that I was like, am I going to have to flip a coin or what? It's like, wow, these guys, they're just not giving me anything to judge.
Sure.
Um, so, which one was the hardest? It would be impossible to say. There's been so many.
Do you have any like all time that you're like, man, like looking back, that was a difficult one to judge, or that you just remember vividly, like, oh, that was a heck of a fight? Because even you had, I'm looking back, and I believe this fight wasn't in Tennessee, I know, but Jake Shields, Dan Henderson back in 2010.
Right.
I'm like, holy moly, all these fights. Bigfoot Silva, Andre Arlovsky, Tyron Woodley, You've got them all on here. Was there any of them that you remember vividly? Like, man, that was number one, maybe an awesome fight to judge, or two, like, man, I hate that I had to judge that one.
Well, this is not for any of the reasons you just named,
Okay.
but I will never forget Dan Henderson, Jake Shields,
Yeah.
because of the Nashville brawl that occurred minutes later. You remember
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Oh, I mean, I was like packing up. The event was over. Little did I wasn't paying attention to the interview in the cage that Jason Mayhem Miller had somehow got in the cage, and he asked Jake Shields a simple question. Hey, buddy, when you gonna give me a shot? Well, apparently Nick and Nate Diaz took exception to that, or the fact that he was even in the cage, and mayhem ensued.
Oh,
Uh, Jeff Mullen, he was screaming at me to come in and help restore order, even though I was a judge. I mean, Jeff knew my
yeah.
history and he wanted
Yeah.
me in the cage. Well, as fate would have it, the first guy I got to was Nick Diaz.
Wow.
He was so strong. As I tried to pull him off uh, Mayhem Miller and trying to negotiate, talk to him, calm him down, as one of my friends said, Anthony, he was dragging you around that cage like a rag doll. Yeah, he was. I'll just never
Jeez.
forget how strong Nick Diaz was.
Wow. That's awesome. What a memory to have of that. Another fight that I saw, and I had no idea that you judged this one, Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum.
Hmm.
What a war that fight, that last round. Oh my gosh. Like
And
I
I
can't
love
imagine.
judging fights like that. I
Yeah,
love
oh
judging
yeah.
those.
Because I can't
They
even
give you
imagine sitting
plenty
cage
to
side for
judge.
that. Oh yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Man, that's so cool. I love it. What other stories you got about judging or things that happen? I'm like, man, I don't even care about my questions. Let's just go down memory lane a little bit. This is awesome.
Man, I this is one of my favorite stories. Jonathan Ivey
Mhm.
was fighting a pro fight in Nashville,
Okay.
and I was sitting cage side with Jeff Mullen, and I can't really remember what capacity. I think I was the ISK rep for maybe a few amateur fights. I wasn't judging because I was sitting next to Jeff. Well, Jonathan was getting pummeled. There was a corner man that followed him around. He was a heavy guy that had face tattoos, super nice kid. And he turns and looks at me and says, Anthony, what should I tell him? Jeff Mullen grabs me by the arm and says, you can't answer that, Anthony. You can't answer that. And I didn't answer that. That was the first time I met Jelly Roll.
Wow.
It was Jelly Roll.
That's
And
insane.
yeah, it's funny. Uh, Jelly, he he was always hanging around the fights and Jonathan Ivy and I'll never forget. I don't know if you know this. I'm also a musician,
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
and somebody had mentioned to him, and he's like, Anthony, I hear you're into music, and I said, yeah. He goes, well, I'm a rapper, and I remember thinking, I'm sure you are.
Yeah. That's
Well,
awesome.
the joke's on me.
Right, because now yeah,
Yeah, the joke is on me,
that
and that goes
oh,
back earlier in this interview when I said things transcend combat sports, other sports, and life itself.
hmm.
Never underestimate anybody,
Oh yeah.
be it a fighter, be it a singer, be it a poet, be a track star, a football player. You just never know the drive or motivation or talent level that's in all of us.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson I learned. Don't underestimate anybody.
That's amazing. Oh, that's amazing. So You have judged, I believe, just this year. Also, oh, let's get that back in. So you've judged UFC, Bellator, and PFL this year, I do believe, if I'm right, or maybe
Yes.
at least in the last 2 years. Um, we're gonna go down memory lane more than likely a little bit here. I'm gonna ask you about all three. I'm gonna ask you three questions about each organization. Okay. Um, let's see. Let's start with PFL. PFL, what is the best fight either that you've been in attendance for or that you've judged for the PFL so far?
Well, do you have the list there to
Oh,
kind of
let me
help me?
see. Yeah. PFL, let's see. This year, you've got Flores and Torres. You've got
I judged all of these.
yes. So there's three PFL fights that you've judged this year. It looks like that may be all of them this year. You're gonna make me try and pronounce these crazy names. Mavlid Kaibulov and Ryoji Kudo. And then
Well, you're kind of getting into, again, I'm not being evasive.
yeah,
You would be surprised how little I know about
yeah,
these fighters.
fair.
Uh, so God, I'm trying to say this and not sound egotistical. I judge so many fights, they all blur into one.
Fair.
It's
Okay.
rare that a fight stands out to me.
Okay.
Now, the organization itself does.
Okay.
The PFL, very structured. I love working for them. Um, what I would remember from them and take away is their professionalism.
Okay.
Um, a lot of organizations trying to come up and get into the market of Bellator or even UFC,
Yeah.
that is one thing they have to have in common: professionalism.
Hmm.
And the PFL, they got it going on. They're very professional, very
Because
organized, structured.
and one thing that I liked that PFL introduced was the body cam for the ref too, because then you kind of get the
Mhm.
vantage point of what they're seeing and why they stopped the fight and things like that too. I wonder if do you ever think that maybe we'll have a judge vantage point where like there's a camera facing where the judge is at a camera facing into the cage that we'll ever see like, oh, maybe this is what the judge is seeing
We,
here?
I haven't heard that discussed, but God, I
Okay.
would be all for it.
Yeah.
Like the scenario I described a few minutes ago, it sure would help the casual fan go, "Wow, that was deep."
Yeah.
The broadcast did not show that, but
Hmm.
that was deep. That kind of thing.
Right. So instead of going organization by organization, I'm just going to ask you, what is the best event that you've been to? And like they may all blur together, I don't know, but like UFC, Bellator, is there anyone that really stands out there? Just like I remember this fight, it was at this place, and it was fantastic.
Well, I keep going back to I'll never forget that strike force. Uh,
Hmm.
that one stands out, and not for such a good reason, but the
Yeah,
Nashville Brawl, and it was in my home state in Tennessee, and
yeah.
there was a lot of good fights, a
I
lot of
believe
big
that.
names.
Yeah, I believe that we had Jeremy Wallace fight on that card. I think he was on the
Yeah,
undercard, and then I think Zach Underwood was also on that card that night, if
right.
I'm not mistaken. Because I remember, I think at that card, I met Big Black. Jason Wood was down there walking around, and he introduced me to Big Black. I'll try to find a photo. We'll throw it up in the mix of everything. But that was, yeah, I remember that night too. That was a really cool event. It was
You
really
know,
nice.
there was another event in St. Louis. I think it was a strike force,
Okay.
and this story is going to sound like I walk into a bar, and and there was a duck, a chicken, and a bear at a time. But I walked into a small bar in St. Louis, Missouri, the night before, and there sat Fedor Emelianenko, uh, Dan Henderson, Quentin Rampage Jackson,
Oh,
and uh, Olive Star Overeem,
wow.
all in a little bar not much bigger than my bedroom I'm in right now.
Wow.
And I just looked around and I remember thinking, gosh, I hope a fight doesn't break out.
Right.
This is
Right.
one
Oh,
bar. I hope a fight does not break out.
sheesh. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine number one, like you said, if a fight broke out, that happening, but two, like just even the stories that these guys were talking about or chit chatting or whatever at that table too, because you've got, I mean, four of the greatest fighters of all time and
Mhm.
at one table, at one bar right there. That's insane. Oh
Well,
man.
actually, you know, if someone asks me, who do I think the greatest MMA fighter of all time? I would have to go with Fedor Emelianenko.
Really?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine any other fighter that completely dominated like he did. Now, in the way he did,
Hmm.
there's been people, John Jones, my God, he ruled forever.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's one of the greatest of all time. Um, uh, St. Pierre, the
Yeah.
list just goes on.
Yeah.
Matt, he a lot of amazing great fighters, but Fedor would kill you.
Yeah.
He would like decapitate you. And, it's like, wow, I would not have wanted to fight Fedor Emelianenko.
No, not me
And I've
neither.
met him several times. He seems to be a nice guy. I don't quite understand if I don't know if he's understanding me
Yeah.
what I say. I don't know if he understands English, but he
Right.
seems to be a nice guy.
Right. So one thing that I'm interested into getting into your brain with, you've been around, the list is a laundry list full of names. Mount Rushmore has four heads. Who is your Mount Rushmore of fighters? Who's your four? If Fedor's your greatest, he's got to be on there. Who's the other three that are kind of at the top of mixed martial arts ever?
Okay, so we are only talking about mixed martial arts.
Let's talk about mixed
Right.
martial arts.
Because I'm a huge fan, in boxing. I don't know if you're familiar with a boxer named Julio Chavez.
Yep.
Uh, he was he was incredible as a
Yeah.
boxer. We're focusing on MMA. Well, I said Fedor,
Mm-hmm.
uh, George St. Pierre.
Yep.
He would be one. And I mentioned Matt Hughes. I was very in John Jones. That would probably be four.
I like it. That's a heck of a list right there. Um, let's
And,
dive into you. Go ahead. No, you've got something else. I like it.
I love quoting Corey Schaefer because he's said so many great things that he's the president of the ISK.
Okay.
He did a speech one time at a strike force that had an all-star crowd listening to him. He said, "What do you guys think could be the worst thing that happened to you tonight?" He said, "If you think losing is the answer, you're wrong. The worst thing that could happen to you tonight is be boring
Mm,
because what we do is entertainment.
right.
People are buying tickets, they're buying pay-per-views, they're turning on their TV sets if it's CBS, ABC. If you bore, they're not going to want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So those four people that I just named was rarely ever boring.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
brought a charisma, they brought an energy, and it's an intangible thing that's hard to describe. They just brought something to the table.
Mm,
And when I say this again, I hope no one takes this as being egotistical. It just was what it was. People ask me about why I was so popular as a kickboxer. One guy summed it up better than anybody. He said, "When I come saw you, every time I come saw you fight, I knew something very violent was going to happen."
yeah.
He said, it might be to you, but we all knew your fights don't go the distance because something brutal is going to happen to somebody.
Yeah.
And people love that. They just loved it. Now, being honest, a lot of that was lack of talent on my part. That's just my recipe for trying to win.
Sure.
I had to make them wars uh, because I didn't think I was fast enough or technical enough to win technical point decisions. That's just wasn't the kind of fighter I was.
Hmm.
And when I look at these guys, those are the kind of guys that really stand out to me. The guys that want to finish a fight. Uh, they're not content with winning a decision. They want a submission. They want a
Hmm.
knockout.
Hmm.
They want to leave no doubt in anybody's mind tomorrow over the morning coffee. There's no controversy. There's no questions about who won that fight.
Yeah.
I really love those guys
Yeah.
and ladies.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. Like that's because you never really think about fighting as the entertainment business, like you said. And even though it is, I mean, you're buying the pay-per-views, you're buying the tickets. And I feel like right now in the UFC specifically, we're starting to kind of see that movement more into entertainment, right? Because they just partnered with the WWE and formed TKO. Like we're starting to kind of see these more personalities coming out. Sugar Sean O'Malley, Conor McGregor. These post-fight interviews are getting more
Mhm.
and more entertainment like. How do you feel that that is doing for the business in itself? Is that a good thing? Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing?
Now, that's a great question. And I have mixed feelings about that. There's one thing that I cannot tolerate is the integrity of the sport being watered down
Mm-hmm.
because I love combat sports. I just told you earlier in this my career, that's one thing that especially boxing has struggled with is the integrity. MMA and kickboxing, I rarely ever hear anyone question, was that fight fixed? Was that fight thrown?
Right.
And I love that. I love the fact that everybody knows it's real.
Yeah.
It is real, and you can tell. I, I hope that line never gets blurred for the sake of entertainment.
Right.
Uh, so that's my concern. But as far as is this bringing it to a bigger audience, obviously I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the UFC is, again, an amazing organization, very conscious of this thing I'm talking about.
Right.
I don't think that they would let that happen.
Yeah.
They just have a great marketing. Like I said, a lot of people don't realize just how floundering the UFC was when the Zuffa brothers purchased it. I mean, it was basically bankrupt. It was
Right.
soon going to go away, and who knows for mixed martial arts if it would even exist today.
Right.
But Dana White, he was a brilliant guy, and he did some changes, and well, the rest is history.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
change is good. And I feel good that the UFC and Bellator, those they understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. One thing that I think with the entertainment side of things is we're starting to see champions kind of move divisions early. Like we talked earlier about like Fedor. Fedor was a heavyweight. GSP was a welterweight until the end of his career when he came back, fought Bisping. Like back in the day, we saw people stick in a division and they stuck it out and they just ran the entire division. And we're starting to see now these champs and guys start moving early just so they can get the double champ. They can get more eyes on them. How do you feel about that kind of stuff?
well, I'm probably the last person you should ask that because I won 5 pro titles in 5 different weight divisions. But Mine wasn't my game room. All these belts are in there, and people go, "Wow, wow, you just must have wanted different." No, I was a kid when I started, and
Hmm.
as I naturally grew up, I would just move divisions.
Okay.
So that's how that happened. But Herb Dean and I was talking about this very subject, cage
Okay.
side, one day, and he said, "Anthony, what you did could not be done today."
Oh no, absolutely.
And just as if on cue, John Jones walks up to where we were talking.
Yeah.
And Herb looked at him. He said, "Anthony, you would be fighting him." And John Jones looked at us and he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I finished my career at your weight."
Wow.
He was so much bigger than me. He
He's
was taller
huge.
than me. He was, he would have massacred me. There's no way I could have fought a guy that big.
Yeah.
So what I would have had to do instead of fight at 185, I would have had to cut to 165 just to fight a guy my own size. So
Sheesh.
these guys have got weight cutting down to an art.
Hmm.
John Jones walks around, I'm sure, as a full-fledged heavyweight,
Right.
but he cuts down, and like this Conor McGregor, you mentioned, did you see pictures of him just like
He's
six
massive.
months or a year ago?
He's got to be 185, 190, somewhere around there, if,
Oh, at least.
at least. And if he's talking about fighting Chandler at 155,
I can't even comprehend that.
no, absolutely not. That's going to be nuts. That's one fight that I'm really excited to see. And I just did like a short video on my Instagram on it of like, when is that going to happen? You got any dirt? You know when that's going to happen, Anthony?
Well, it keeps going back and forth. There was a
Hmm.
there was a minute there that they were saying it would never happen, and
Right.
now it's back on. You know, money talks, BS walks.
Right. Well, apparently Connor said as of yesterday that he had stuff turned into USADA as of yesterday. So, but we've seen how he is
Uh,
on Instagram, Twitter, and all that kind of stuff too, though. So who knows what's really going on? But I'm I'm hopeful for
but when I
January.
talk about the money, when I talk about the money, I'm talking about how the UFC sees this. That's
Yeah.
going to be a cash cow.
Oh,
Trust
100%.
me, they want it to happen.
Yeah.
Uh, the athletic commissions want it to happen. They want it to happen in their state. I know I'd love to see that in Nashville, or I would. It's like it's everybody's win win win.
Yeah.
So everybody wants it to happen. Obviously, it's got to happen legitimately. He's going to
Hmm.
have to make weight. They're going to have to pass the drug screens and everything. It's got to be legit.
Yeah.
But everybody wants it to happen. I just hope Connor wants it to happen as bad as we all do.
Right.
So I know
Exactly.
Michael Chandler, he's there. He's there.
Yeah.
So
Is there any matchups right now that you would like to see that UFC hasn't announced, or anything that you've kind of kept your radar on that you followed and you're like, these guys need to fight right now?
uh, well, obviously that one. I'd like to
Yeah.
see that one. I'd like to see Nate Diaz back in the octagon one more time at least.
Okay. Any
Uh,
against who? Connor? Do the trilogy fight?
that would be amazing.
Yeah. That would be really good. If
That
that say that was the retirement fight for both of those dudes, right? That would be the perfect one for both men, I would think.
yeah,
For me, I think Connor's title contention is kind of over. I mean, it really depends on how he looks against Michael Chandler. But based off of his last few fights, that Poirier fight breaking the leg, and it's just it doesn't really seem
yeah,
like he's there. It's more so get the money while you can and get back out.
right, right. And Nate's in the same position. God, I
Yeah.
love him. But realistically, are they going to win another world title? I doubt it.
Nah, probably not.
But they will entertain us.
Oh
They're
yeah,
always entertaining. They got that
absolutely,
magic I was talking about.
100%. Is there any division right now in the UFC that has your attention the most?
Well, I like the middleweights.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Especially now,
Um,
Sean Strickland being the champion. Didn't see that one coming. There's
yeah,
a couple the big fights coming up. Hamza and Costa. You've got Roman and Jared Cannonier. I'm
yeah.
curious to see what they end up doing with all that.
Yeah, all of them are interesting matchup. Like you said, nobody saw Strickland, but nobody saw that coming, and I
No.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. That adds to the integrity I was talking about.
Hmm.
It's like, wow, this is real, and everybody's coming to win.
Yep,
I love it.
exactly. Yeah, I think that one, and I think the bantamweight, or yeah, the bantamweight division right now is super
It's
interesting. With
hot. It's
yeah,
hot. Yes. I
I
almost said
just
bantamweight.
I just saw right before we hopped on here, they've two fights are being targeted in January, which is they're also leaning towards a third. But Marab and Henry Cejudo, they're apparently targeting in January. Apparently, they're targeting Arnold Allen and Movsar Evloev, and then Volkanovski Topuria in January, all in Canada. So that should be pretty interesting. If all those were on the same card, that'd be a really good card.
Yeah, it would. I'd like to see that.
Yeah. So one more question that I have, and then we're pretty much done here. You work with a lot of people that people see on TV quite a bit. Who is the funniest person that you work with at all these events?
Well, there's a lot of colorful people, Joe Rogan, but funny, Mike Beltran, the
Really?
referee with the long, oh,
Yes.
he is a hoot. He, on Instagram, he's always sending me these funny videos, these TikToks, and they're all hilarious.
That's
Hilarious.
that is not who
We're,
I would have guessed. That's all. That's awesome.
we're constantly trading funny videos back and forth. Oh, he's a nut.
Well,
Very,
and
very good referee. Very good referee.
absolutely. Yeah, I think he's easily in the top three. Easily in the
Yes.
top three. Well, Anthony, any shout outs you want to make? This is the end of my questions. This is all I've got, man. We've got like less than a minute left on Zoom. So what who do you want to shout out? How can people find you? Not to send you any kind of threats or messages about judging, but just to say what's up. Go ahead, spill all that out.
Well, like I said, I can't thank guys like Corey Schaefer, president of the ISKA, Jeff Mullen, Andy Foster, guys like that gave me the opportunity to do the things I love. And I'm on social media. You can check me out on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. I love hearing from you guys. So hit me up and follow these crazy stories. That's my life.
Well, Anthony, I appreciate it so much with you being on here. It was a pleasure to sit down for the last hour or so and hear all the stories and memories and reminiscing and all the things. Can't wait to see you again in person. When's the next event you're going to be in locally that you know of?
I'm in Paducah, Kentucky this weekend
Okay.
For the Jonas show there, and then the next weekend you can check me out at the UFC in Vegas at Fight Night.
Nice. All right. Well, Anthony, again, thank you so much for hopping on, man. I hope you have a great rest of the night. Appreciate you.
You too. Thanks.